If you've ever taken a job just to survive, this is the story that will haunt you long after the paycheck is gone. The keys to Anchor Point Plaza felt wrong the moment they touched my skin. Heavy brass. Unnaturally cold. Like they'd been sitting in a morgue drawer instead of a drawer in some broken-down office. I held them in my palm a second too long, staring at them like they might whisper something back. They didn't. Just waited. Like the mall itself waiting for someone stupid or desperate enough to walk through its doors one more time. My name is Elias Mercer. I'm a veteran. A drunk. A man who's lost everything that ever mattered, and on November 3rd, I took a $50 night shift to patrol a dead shopping mall that killed 37 people. That's not an exaggeration. On Black Friday, 6 years ago, a riot broke out inside Anchor Point Plaza. Fire tore through the building. Smoke swallowed the skylights. And when they counted the bodies afterward, 37 shoppers and staff were missing or confirmed dead. The place was shut down permanently, boarded up like a tomb. And yet, someone still had to guard it. That someone was me. No shelter. No options. No hope. Just me. A duffel bag. A lighter engraved with my dead wife's name. And a job nobody sane would take. I didn't ask questions when the man in the wheelchair handed me the clipboard. Didn't blink when he said, "You don't need to lock it behind you. It's not about keeping people out, it's about keeping things in." I thought it was just some creepy old man shtick. Something to make the job sound scarier than it was. I was wrong. So wrong. Because inside that mall was something else. Something waiting. And the first thing it showed me was my daughter's voice. Calling from the dark, "Daddy." The keys to Anchor Point Plaza were heavier than they had any right to be. Worn brass. Dull-edged. Ice-cold in a way that didn't feel natural, even through the calluses on my fingers. I rolled them in my palm as I stood outside the cracked glass doors of a place most people had forgotten existed. Most people, but not me. If you've ever touched something and felt it remember you, that's what these keys felt like. Like they knew who I was before I ever stepped inside. My reflection glared back at me in the shattered glass, gaunt cheeks, salt and pepper beard I hadn't trimmed in months, eyes that hadn't truly slept since Afghanistan. I wasn't the man I used to be. Wasn't a Marine anymore. Wasn't a husband. Wasn't a father. Just another ghost in a country that doesn't bury its broken, just recycles them into whatever job pays $50 and doesn't ask too many questions. And tonight, that job was this 12 hours inside a shopping mall that had burned 37 people alive. Haunted, maybe. Cursed, probably. Dangerous, I didn't care. Not when the shelters were full, and the night was freezing, and my only company was a bottle of cheap whiskey and a Zippo lighter with my wife's name carved into it. I didn't even flinch when the old man in the wheelchair, Walter Gray, handed me the clipboard earlier that day. His hands were twisted with burns, and his voice sounded like sandpaper dragged across a dry throat. He'd looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You don't have to lock the door behind you. Ain't nobody trying to break in. It's getting out, that's the problem." And then he laughed. This dry, hollow, rattling sound like something in his chest didn't want to let go. I didn't laugh back. Just nodded, took the keys, and stepped into a place that was supposed to be dead. But it wasn't. Places like Anchor Point, they don't die. They wait. And tonight, I was the one who finally answered the call. I slid the brass key into the lock and turned it slowly. The mechanism resisted me at first, groaning like it hadn't been moved in years, then gave way with a dull metallic clunk that echoed louder than it should have in the stillness. The glass doors creaked open on rusted hinges, releasing a breath of stale air that hit me in the face like opening a long-sealed crypt. The smell was thick, acrid plastic, scorched wood, and something else. Something sour underneath, like old smoke trapped in the lungs of the building itself. 42 years on this earth, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and I'd never smelled anything like that. Old fire damage doesn't just cling to fabric, it seeps into your bones. Walter Gray's words came back to me as I crossed the threshold. You don't need to lock it behind you. I'd raised an eyebrow when he said it, and he'd just smiled with a mouth half melted by the flames. Ain't nobody trying to get in here, son. It's getting out that's the problem. I should have asked more questions. But when you're living in your car and every church basement smells like bleach and regret, you don't question $50 and a roof. He'd handed me the clipboard with trembling, burned fingers, his wheelchair squeaking as he turned. Just one more thing, he rasped over his shoulder, his breath wheezing like dry leaves caught in a vent. Don't try to save them. They ain't people no more. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. Some warnings don't need clarification, they crawl under your skin and stay there. That night, Anchor Point swallowed me without a sound. The mall was huge, 2 stories. Skylights overhead. Food court in the center, but none of that mattered as much as the quiet. Not silence, no. That would have been mercy. This was a humming quiet, like a radio between stations. Like a pressure in your skull you didn't notice until it pulsed. And as I stepped fully inside, past the glass that no longer showed reflections, I swear, I felt the air shift like something in there had just noticed I'd arrived. I left the door open behind me. Not because I wanted an escape. Because I already knew. Nothing here wanted to leave. It just wanted me to stay. The interior of Anchor Point Plaza didn't welcome me. It absorbed me. Fluorescent lights sputtered overhead, most of them dead. But just enough flickered to cast long, stuttering shadows that shifted whenever I wasn't looking directly at them. My boots echoed against the cracked tile floor, each step bouncing off glass storefronts covered in dust and graffiti. A central courtyard opened ahead, wide and lifeless, ringed with escalators frozen mid-climb like broken bones. The food court sat at the far end, eerily preserved tables arranged as if waiting for customers who would never return. Chairs still tucked in with the politeness of the dead. I moved slowly, taking it all in. Every corner of the space humming with a tension that had nothing to do with power lines or wind drafts. It was a psychic pressure, like the building itself was holding its breath. That's when I saw it half hidden beneath an overturned plastic chair, surrounded by empty soda cups and scorched napkins, a teddy bear. Small, one arm missing. Fur blackened around the edges like it had been pulled from a campfire too late to save. Something about it made me stop. My breath caught in my throat, not because I was scared, but because I knew that bear. I dropped to one knee, joints cracking, and reached for it. Its one remaining glass eye caught the flickering light and threw it back with an almost human glint. When I picked it up, my fingers came away wet. Not with water. Something dark and slick and unnatural coated the singed fabric. It shimmered like oil, and it clung to my skin like memory. My chest tightened. My dog tags shifted. And in my jacket pocket, the Zippo lighter trembled. I pulled it out, its dented brass glinting under the stuttering light. To Devon, love, Marin, my wife's last gift. I'd kept it through war, through loss, through the kind of shame you don't talk about. The lighter had never trembled before, but now it vibrated in my hand like it was receiving a signal. That's when I heard her voice so clear, so soft from the west corridor. Daddy. And in that moment, I knew the mall wasn't empty. It remembered. And worse, it remembered me. The lighter vibrated again, harder this time, like it was trying to crawl out of my palm. The bear still sat in my other hand, its fur glistening with that strange, oily residue. I should have dropped both. Should have walked right back out the door, thrown the keys into the storm drain, and vanished like every sane man before me. But when the dead speak in the voice of your daughter, you don't run. You listen. Daddy. It came again, this time from the corridor leading west, where the lights were out and the air ran colder than the rest of the mall. I froze. 6 years. 6 years since the crash. 6 years since Marin and June died wrapped around a telephone pole while I was passed out drunk in our living room. The guilt still burned hotter than any fire I'd survived, and yet here I was, in a mall I'd never been inside before, holding my dead daughter's bear in one hand and hearing her voice call to me from the dark. Not a memory. Not a hallucination. A voice. Real. Present. Aware. June. My voice cracked under the weight of the name. My chest felt like it was being compressed by something invisible, something heavy and alive. The humming in the air intensified, subtle no longer. Now a full-body pressure that buzzed beneath my skin. It was like standing next to a subwoofer tuned to some frequency no human ear should catch. I took a step toward the west corridor without meaning to. The bear pulsed in my hand. The lighter vibrated in the other like a dying heartbeat. Whatever waited in that darkness didn't just remember me, it wanted me. And in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run colder than the November wind. This place had rules. Rules I didn't know yet. Rules I hadn't agreed to, but was already breaking. Behind me, the mall door still hung open. But the air shifted, like someone or something had just moved past me. I should have turned around. Should have run. But grief is gravity. And mine was dragging me deeper into the mall. And into whatever nightmare was waiting at the end of that voice. The west corridor stretched out before me like a throat waiting to swallow. The further I stepped from the open glass doors, the more the air thickened like breathing through cloth soaked in gasoline. Every instinct told me to turn back. But that voice, God, that voice, it wasn't just familiar, it was perfect. June's voice at 6 years old, untouched by time or death or trauma, frozen in my memory. And now, whispering from a hallway that shouldn't exist. I took one more step. The bear pressed against my chest inside my jacket like a second heartbeat. The lighter buzzed against my thigh with every step I took. I was moving through molasses slowed by fear, pulled by grief. The corridor didn't feel right. The walls looked normal but breathed their surfaces subtly expanding and contracting like lungs in slow panic. On either side of me, shattered display windows gaped open, revealing scenes of collapsed shelves overturned, mannequins scattered like battlefield corpses, ceiling tiles missing and exposing wires that hung like entrails. And then I saw it. At the junction where the corridor split, a mannequin stood, one arm missing, the other pointing, directly at a boarded-up toy store. Its face was smooth, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. But a single, jagged crack ran from its temple to its jaw, like something had once tried to scream through it. I stopped, my hands instinctively curled into fists. I hadn't felt this kind of alertness since my second tour. That edge of knowing you were being watched but couldn't prove it. My brain kicked in clear corners. Watch your six. Trust nothing. The mannequin didn't move. But I swear its blank face had turned slightly as I approached. Like it had registered me. Like it knew I didn't belong. I started to pass, slowly, eyes fixed on the thing's hand. It didn't react. But a flicker, some twitch behind the glass made me stop. Not out of fear, out of understanding. There were rules here. That mannequin was showing me one of them. And if I ignored it, I wouldn't get another warning. Not here. Not in Anchor Point Plaza. Places like this don't give second chances. The toy store's security gate hung halfway down, crooked like a broken jaw, with just enough clearance to duck under. The space beyond was a mausoleum of forgotten joy shelves, barren except for a few crushed boxes, melted action figures, and price tags half-curled from heat. Signs dangled from the ceiling, scorched and sagging, still bragging about a Black Friday blowout. The irony punched me in the gut. I crouched and slipped beneath the gate, the metal frame groaning above me like it knew I was trespassing. The moment I entered, the lighter in my pocket surged with heat, not warmth, but the kind that screams wrong. It pulsed like a warning beacon. My boots crunched over plastic shards, and I followed the sound, the whisper of movement, faint as breath behind drywall. Then I saw it. Someone crouched behind a toppled display case near the back of the store. At first, I thought it was a mannequin discarded like the rest, but then it shifted, twitched, moved like a thing remembering it once had bones. She looked like a teenage girl, or had, once. Her lower half was fused to the melted frame of a shopping cart, plastic and flesh welded into one grotesque shape. Her arms ended in mannequin joints, glossy and smooth, bent at unnatural angles as she dragged herself slowly along the ruined tiles. But her face... God, her face was still alive. Her eyes locked onto mine with a spark of desperate recognition. Human eyes in a face no longer fully human. My hand went instinctively to my dog tags and they vibrated. Not from motion, from recognition. The air was wrong again. Not cold, not hot, but charged as if the very concept of temperature didn't apply here. "You okay, kid?" I asked before I could stop myself, voice barely above a whisper. And that's when the floor rippled. Not metaphorically, literally. The tiles beneath my feet moved like water, shimmering black and unstable. The shelves trembled. The girl didn't respond. Her mannequin hands reached not for me, but for my chest, for the dog tags. And then, she spoke. But it wasn't her voice. "I'm scared. Daddy." June's voice. My daughter's voice. From a face that was not hers. And I realized whatever this place was, it knew exactly where to hurt me. The moment that voice left her lips, or whatever passed for lips on that thing, the floor beneath me convulsed. The ripples deepened, tiles folding like waves, warping the space as if the mall itself were rejecting me. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my footing as the display rack shuddered and tipped, crashing to the floor with a sound too loud for such a small space. The static in my ears spiked to a screech, drowning out thought, drowning out memory. All that remained was her voice, June's voice, echoing through a mouth that wasn't hers. "I'm scared. Daddy." It shouldn't have been possible. She'd been gone for years, buried in a casket so small it broke the world in two. But the girl thing kept crawling closer, plastic joints clicking softly. Her eyes fixed on my chest like she knew what was buried behind my ribs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The hum became physical, a pressure that pushed against my eardrums, against my skull, like the mall was trying to reshape me. My training kicked in finally. 1, 2, 3. I said it out loud, like a mantra, like Hayes had scribbled in those instructions. Count. Focus. Ground yourself. I forced my eyes shut and repeated the numbers like a prayer. When I opened them again, the floor had stilled, but the thing hadn't moved. She was still there. Mannequin hands frozen mid-reach. Her head tilted at an angle no human neck could survive. Watching. Always. Watching. I backed away slowly, never turning my back, until I reached the gate. I ducked under it, fast hands and knees scraping the tile, and turned back just long enough to see her silhouette vanish into the dark. And there it was again. The mannequin. The one-armed one. Now standing at the corridor junction, its arm no longer pointing at the toy store but at the escalators. And its face still blank. Still cracked. But somehow, I knew it was guiding me. Not out of kindness, but because the next rule had begun. I followed the mannequin's direction without hesitation. Not because I trusted it, nothing in this place could be trusted, but because hesitation felt like a mistake I wouldn't survive twice. The escalators loomed ahead, their metal teeth exposed where rubber treads had long since been torn away. They looked more like open jaws than machinery. Each step groaned under my weight, the sound too wet, too organic, like bones shifting beneath carpeted skin. I climbed carefully, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The bear thudded softly in my pocket, heavier than it had any right to be. The lighter stayed clenched in my palm, no longer vibrating, but still warm like a living thing. Halfway up, I glanced over the railing. The food court below was a frozen graveyard, tables untouched, soda fountains dead, shadows shifting against the light like they didn't belong to anything physical. From this height, Anchor Point finally revealed itself not as a mall, but as a tomb. 2 levels of storefronts, empty and dark. Kiosks overturned, glass cracked like spiderwebs across forgotten displays. A fountain in the center, long dry, filled with tarnished pennies that had turned green with age. Every corner of the space seemed to bend away from the eye when stared at too long. The shadows didn't follow the laws of light. They moved when I blinked. My watch read 12:30 a.m. 90 minutes into the shift. It already felt like I'd been there a year. I leaned on the upper railing and tried to catch my breath, but it didn't help. The air felt wrong. Not stale, not poisonous, but loaded. Like something was watching and waiting. I tried to tell myself I hadn't heard June's voice in that store. That the girl in the cart was just a hallucination. That the mannequin wasn't pointing me into a trap. But the truth settled deeper than fear. Anchor Point wasn't haunted, it was hungry. And it didn't want me to run. It wanted me to understand. Before it fed, I stood there at the top of the escalator, trying to convince myself that I wasn't losing my mind. That the bear wasn't heavier. That the mannequin hadn't moved. That the girl in the shopping cart hadn't spoken in my dead daughter's voice. But denial doesn't last long in a place like Anchor Point. This mall doesn't let you lie to yourself, it peels you open. One memory at a time. I felt something shift in my pocket, the lighter. I pulled it out, expecting it to be cold. Lifeless. Instead, the second it cleared the fabric, it flared to life. The flame burst upward in a violent arc blue. Not orange, and it burned without me touching the wheel. It didn't cast light. Not really. The shadows didn't retreat. But I felt the heat, intense and pulsing, like it was coming from inside my own ribs. I dropped it instinctively. The brass clattered against the floor, but the flame didn't go out. It kept burning, that unnatural blue licking at the air like it wanted more than oxygen. And then I saw it. A mannequin I hadn't noticed before, standing 5 feet away, dressed in a security guard's uniform, face frozen in surprise. As I stared, a crack split across its cheek, slow and deliberate, until black oil oozed out and pooled at its feet. I took a step back, but the oil spread quickly, and in its shimmering surface, something appeared, not a reflection. A scene. My daughter, June, blowing out candles on her 6th birthday, princess-shaped, pink and laughing. Marin beside her, smiling, recording on her phone. Me, behind the camera, sober for once. Make a wish. Princess. I heard my voice say, distorted, as if through a detuned radio. And then the flames grew. Too fast. Too real. They swallowed the cake. The table. They reached for her face. I staggered backward. Bile rising. Lungs shaking. It was my memory, but twisted. Contaminated. Weaponized. When I looked up, the mannequin was just a mannequin again. The oil was gone. The lighter had gone dark. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't just being haunted. I was being shown. And whatever was behind all this, it didn't want to scare me. It wanted to teach me. Or punish me. Maybe both. I barely had time to pick up the lighter before I realized I wasn't alone. Something stood at the foot of the screen, the same place where the projector had just been casting visions of my life, like twisted film reels. It wasn't a mannequin. It moved too precisely, too deliberately. It wore desert camo, Marine Corps utilities, the same ones I'd worn on my last deployment. And when it raised its hand, it saluted. Perfect form. Crisp elbow. Fingers tight. I froze. The lighter's flame flickered in my palm, reflecting across the smooth plastic of the figure's half face. Because that's what it was. Half mannequin, half man. The left side was molded and featureless, shiny like showroom plastic. But the right side was him. Ramirez. Corporal Jesse Ramirez. My squad mate. My brother. My ghost. He stepped forward into the red glow of the emergency exit signs. And when he opened his mouth, I felt every hair on my body stand on end. "Good to see you, sir," he said. The voice was his, exactly as I remembered it. Down to the slow Texas drawl and the way he clipped his RS, but beneath it, layered like static under a radio broadcast, something else whispered with him. Something broken. Something ancient. I staggered back, eyes wide, the lighter trembling again in my hand. "You're not real," I said, more to myself than to him. "You died." I watched it happen. Ramirez didn't argue. He didn't blink. He just took one more step forward and said, "Yes, sir." I did. But death isn't what we thought it was, and neither is life. Behind him, the mannequins in the audience sat frozen in rows. But the longer I stared, the more I realized they weren't mannequins at all. They were placeholders. Empty skins, waiting to be filled. And every one of them was watching me. My tags buzzed harder against my chest. The bear pulsed with something like breath. And Ramirez raised his hand again, not to salute, but to offer. "We're all trapped here, Sergeant. Between moments. Between worlds. We remember who we were, but not how to be human again. And we need you to make the choice." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The mall had spoken before, but now it had a face, and it was mine. I didn't remember crossing the floor, but I was standing beside the burned fountain again. Zippo still clenched in my fist like a tether to the real world. Ramirez stood opposite me, his boots half submerged in a slick puddle of that black oil, except now it shimmered like glass and hummed, like a tuning fork pressed to my chest. The mannequins in the surrounding stores weren't still anymore. They twitched, shifted. Some had tilted heads now. Some had faces. Ramirez spoke again, and this time I heard everything. "It's called the frequency. Sarge. It's not a sound. It's not a signal. It's a place between places, like static between stations. Like a war zone between heaven and hell." He stepped closer. The mall shifted behind him, lights blinking on where they'd been off, others failing where they'd just worked. Time here wasn't a straight line, it curved and snapped like a rubber band. "We got caught in it," he said. "All of us. Some during the fire. Some during the war. Some during quiet little moments where nobody noticed us dying inside." He knelt and touched the oil, and it rippled like a pond disturbed by breath. When you fall between moments, you don't go to heaven. You don't burn, either. You drift. I finally understood what he meant by drifters. They weren't ghosts. They were echoes stuck in feedback. Loops. Memories with nowhere to die. Anchor point's just one spot where the veil got too thin, he continued. Too much grief. Too much silence. Too many things left unsaid. My throat tightened. June's voice. Marin's smile. The lighter flickering on its own. They weren't random. They were tuned in. I was being broadcast to. I turned slowly, taking in the full stretch of the second floor. Every mannequin I saw now seemed to breathe. Some had dog tags. Some wore children's clothes. All of them looked almost like someone I remembered. Why me, I asked. But I already knew the answer. Because I was broken in the right shape. Because my grief matched the frequency's tone. Ramirez nodded. "You're not just here by chance, Sarge. You're here because you've been playing the frequency your whole damn life." Ramirez led me toward the east wing, where the storefronts dissolved into empty framework, just metal bones and torn insulation, like the mall had started to rot from the inside out. There, nailed crooked on the wall between two melted exit signs, was a laminated evacuation map. Standard mall layout. 2 floors. Emergency exits. Maintenance shafts. But someone had altered it. Dozens of small red dots marked locations across the blueprint. Some bled through with permanent marker. Others stabbed with rusted pins. 38 in total. "What are they?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Ramirez pointed. "Spots where the frequency thins. Places where echoes gather. Where rules change." He tapped the marker closest to us. "This one's where you saw the bear." That was June's point. He moved left. Food court. Where they screamed during the fire. Toy store. Cart girl. You're walking the pattern, even if you didn't know it. I stared at the dots and felt a chill run down my spine, not because they formed a shape, but because they didn't. There was no logic, no symmetry, just chaos stitched into geometry, like a spiderweb woven by something that had never seen a spider. And yet, it felt intentional. "What's in the center?" I asked. Ramirez didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward a blackened patch in the dead center of the diagram. No red dot, no exit near it, just a faded circle labeled Sub-Level Access Service Void. "That's the nexus," he finally said. "Where everything overlaps, where everything began." I leaned in closer, and for a moment, I swore the map shimmered like heat waves or oil film. And behind it, for just a split second, I saw something pulse. Like a heart. Like light. The mall wasn't just a building. It was a body. And these 38 points, pressure points, trauma sites, ritual scars. Ramirez exhaled and said, "You don't get out until you understand where you are. And who you were." The final dot was waiting. And I knew it wasn't on the map. It was inside me. Walter Gray stood just outside the reach of the emergency lights. Half of his face illuminated in sickly red, the other swallowed by the mall's unnatural dark. His suit was still pressed, still clean, as if time didn't touch him the same way it did me. He looked like someone pulled from a painting unfinished, fraying at the edges. I didn't ask how he got there. Somehow, I knew he'd always been there. Watching. Waiting. He motioned for me to follow. And I did. passing mannequins that no longer tried to hide their breath. Some turned as I walked. Others wept without tears. We stopped at a locked service hatch beside a charred escalator. A sigil had been burned into the steel, a perfect spiral of ash and oil. I didn't recognize it, but something deep in my bones remembered. Walter finally spoke. Every soul here made a choice, he said. Some begged for another shot. Others ran from what they did. And some, he turned toward me, stood still for too long. He stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. But you're different. The mall opened for you. It showed you the map. I stared into his face and saw movement behind his eyes, shadows shifting like old film reel burn marks. He wasn't alive. Not anymore. But he wasn't dead either. What happens if I open it? I asked. His hand tightened. Then you'll see it. The nexus, the source, the end and the beginning. And from there, you decide. Decide what I whispered. He smiled, sadly, kindly, like a man offering poison in a crystal glass. Whether you want to stay, or let them go. My throat locked. June. Marin. Ramirez. The girl in the cart. The mannequins. The whispers. The bear pulsing in my jacket. Gray saw the war in my eyes and nodded slowly. They're not holding you. You're holding them. And if you open that hatch, they'll feel it. Every one of them. The sigil pulsed, once blue light leaking through the cracks. You can stay, he said, and live inside what was, or walk into what comes next. I didn't speak. I just reached for the handle. Because the scariest part wasn't what I would find. It was who I'd have to leave behind. The handle was cold, but not metallic. It felt like bone. Smooth, porous, alive in a way that made my fingers recoil. But I held on. I turned it slowly, and the sigil on the hatch pulsed again, not just light, but memory. My memory. June's laugh. Marin's hand brushing against mine in the kitchen. The moment I walked away from Ramirez's family at the funeral because I couldn't look them in the eye. It all surged through the handle like electricity feeding into my blood. The door clicked, then opened outward, not into a hallway, but into a spiral. A corridor that shouldn't exist. It folded left, down, inward, and sideways all at once, walls lined with flickering bulbs and black stains that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The floor wasn't tile. It was reflection, a mirror that didn't show me, but a version of me I didn't want to see. Wasted, hollowed out, eyes gone gray. A version that never stopped drinking, that never walked into this mall, that never fought to come back. I stepped forward. The door slammed shut behind me. No handle on this side. The hallway stretched and compressed as I moved, like the building was breathing around me. Every few steps, a new voice echoed off the walls. Each one someone I loved, someone I failed. You promised me you'd come home. You weren't drunk. You were gone. You held the lighter. Dad. You lit the fuse. The voices weren't accusing. They were remembering. And the spiral pulled tighter. The lights blinked out one by one, until only a single bulb ahead flickered blue, casting a glow that showed every crack in the walls like veins under pale skin. This was no longer the mall. This was beneath the mall. A sublayer. A spinal cord. A place where the rules of architecture and memory blended into something biological. And at the center, just beyond the light, was it. A second door. No handle. No hinges. Just a pulsing circle of stone. Breathing. Waiting. Like it knew me. Like it had been expecting me. And if I passed through it, I wouldn't come out the same. I stepped through the living stone and into silence. Not emptiness, silence. The kind that presses against your skin, against your eyes, that erases the sound of your own heartbeat. And in that silence, they appeared. Marin and June. Not as flesh and blood, but as light, shaped like them, moving like them, looking at me. I fell to my knees. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was home. June reached for me first, her form pulsing gently, like static molded into memory. Her face glowed with that same crooked smile she wore when she'd lose a board game and pretend not to cry. "Daddy," she said, and my name shattered inside me. Marin stood beside her, her hand resting lightly on our daughter's shoulder, her face calm, her eyes wet not with tears, but with knowing. "You came," she whispered. "I told her you would." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, just shook. My hands reached forward, but stopped short of touching. Their light was warm, but intangible. Like memory. Like grief that learned to forgive. They told me I had a choice. I finally managed. To stay. To hold on. Or, Marin nodded. Or to let go. The words hit harder than any ghost. Because I knew what they meant. I wasn't being punished. I was being offered healing. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to take it. June tilted her head. "It's okay. Daddy, we're okay now." And with that, I broke. All the guilt. All the nights screaming into a bottle. The prayers unanswered. The way I'd memorized the funeral carpet patterns so I wouldn't look at the casket. It bled out of me. And the Nexus absorbed it. Not like a vacuum, but like a witness. Marin knelt in front of me. "If you stay," she said, "you'll keep them company. Ramirez, the girl, the broken pieces. If you go," she smiled, "you live. Not just survive. Live." June leaned in close. "We'll still be with you. Just not where it hurts." The light flickered and they began to fade. Not because they were taken, but because they were free. And the final choice settled in my bones. Not in fear, but in love. I opened my eyes. Not slowly, not peacefully, but like someone ripped me from a current I was never meant to leave. My back ached, my tongue was dry, my lips were cracked. And I was lying on the cold tile floor of the Anchor Point Plaza security office. The chair was overturned beside me. The monitors were dark. The coffee in the cup had long since gone cold. Everything looked normal. But wrong. Like I'd woken up inside a photograph of a memory I didn't fully trust. I sat up slowly, every joint screaming. The bear was still in my jacket pocket, warm and unmoving. The Zippo cold, dead. No flame, no whisper. Just brass and silence. I staggered to my feet, and the second I did, I felt it. Something was missing. Not a threat. Not a presence. A weight. The frequency. The pull. The ghost hum in my bones. Gone. Like a fever finally breaking. Like a scream that ran out of throat. I opened the security door and stepped into the mall. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, flickering in a way that could be written off as faulty wiring, but I knew better. The mannequins were still. Empty. Truly empty. The girl in the cart was gone. Ramirez was gone. Marin. June. The oil stains had dried. The spiral door, a wall now, sealed and bare. But the bear pulsed once in my pocket. Just one. Soft thump. Like a goodbye. I walked through Anchor Point one last time, tracing the pattern without thinking. Past the toy store. Past the food court. Past the shattered fountain. Nothing moved. Nothing watched. Nothing reached. And for the first time since I walked into this place, I wasn't afraid. The air was clearer. Lighter. And when I stepped outside, the sun was rising over the parking lot, cutting long shadows between the crumbled cars like a blade across old wounds. I turned back once, just to see. Anchor Point stood silent, but in the upper window, above the old Sears sign, I thought I saw a face, watching, smiling, not in menace, but in memory. I didn't wave. I just whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time in years, I walked forward without looking back. 3 days passed before I could look at myself in the mirror without flinching. I'd left Anchor Point. I'd crossed the lot. I'd stepped back into the world. But the world hadn't fully let me back in. I checked myself into a small motel off Highway 3, not far from a diner with 24-hour eggs and a waitress who didn't ask questions. The kind of place where the clock ticks wrong, but no one complains. The kind of place where broken men go to stay unnoticed. I stared at the ceiling a lot, kept the lights on, slept with the bear under my pillow like some grown-up relic of a nightmare half remembered. But that's the thing. Anchor Point didn't fade like a dream. It followed me, quietly, like a rule you forgot to read until it was too late. It started small. The coffee machine at the motel front desk clicked 3 times before brewing. Always 3. The door to my room refused to open if I looked directly at the handle. And the vending machine only dispensed red items: chips, soda, licorice, no matter what I chose. Coincidence? Maybe. But you tell me how many coincidences make a pattern. I left $1 on the nightstand one morning. Just habit. When I came back, the bed was made. The lights dimmed and the $1 was gone. In its place, a strip of burned film. Just 3 frames. One showed Ramirez. One showed June. One showed me. All standing in the mall's food court, staring at something the camera didn't capture. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because I understood something nobody ever says in those ghost stories. The haunting doesn't end where the story stops. Sometimes, it just changes form. The rules are still there. Maybe they always were. In the liminal spaces. In the radio static. In the way your reflection lingers just a second too long. Anchor Point is gone, but something opened. And if you ever feel the air shift, or hear the mall music faintly through a vent, or find a spiral drawn behind a bathroom mirror, don't touch it. Don't follow it. And whatever you do, don't turn around. Because if you do, you might find out you never really left. I tried to go back to normal, whatever that meant. I shaved, ate at real diners, watched TV with the volume too loud. But normal isn't a place you live in. It's a place you remember. And I wasn't allowed back in. The rules followed me. Or maybe I carried them. It began subtly, like glitches. Every clock I passed showed a different time, but all ended in 38. 3:38, 5:38, 9:38. The motel TV only picked up static unless I whispered, "Ready," into the remote. My phone vibrated at 3:00 a.m. every night, displaying a notification that just read aisle 12. I hadn't even told it I left the mall, but it knew. Something did. One night, I drove north toward a rest stop lit by harsh sodium bulbs. I needed air, a break, something clean. But as I parked, the music from the car's speakers changed on its own. No Spotify, no Bluetooth, Just that mall jingle again, off-key, looping, stitched with reversed whispers. My hands locked on the wheel. My breath fogged. And there on the far end of the lot, I saw her. The girl in the shopping cart. Still. Watching. Lit only by the vending machine glow. She raised her hand not to wave, but to point. Behind me. I turned. Nothing was there. When I looked back, she was gone. Only a cart. And a trail of oil. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I just turned the car around. Because some patterns don't want to be broken. They want to be seen. They want to be understood. And if you're the wrong shape like I was, they find you in motel mirrors, in red blinking lights, in songs you can't unhear, in toys that breathe when no one's looking. Anchor point isn't a place. It's a condition. And I think I infected the world with it. You can't tell anyone. They won't believe you. They'll call it PTSD, hallucination, sleep deprivation. But if you've seen the spiral, you know. And if your hallway stretches 1 foot too long, if your cat stares at the corner for too long, if your daughter draws a bear with empty eyes, don't ignore it. Don't run. Just whisper, I hear the rules. Because now, so does everything else. I left the motel before sunrise. Something about the light made me nervous now. Not because it burned, but because it revealed. I needed motion. Roads. Distance. Something to make the weight fade. But the farther I drove, the more the world started looking like the mall. Not literally, but in texture. Cracked linoleum. Too white light. People moving like mannequins wearing skin. And every time I blinked, I swore the spiral was hiding in things: coffee cup stains, sidewalk cracks, the way wires hung from poles. The pattern wasn't just following me. It was spreading through me, living in how I saw. I stopped at a gas station 2 towns out. One of those run-down, flickering sign joints with a bathroom that hadn't been cleaned since Clinton was in office. I washed my face in the mirror, trying not to look myself in the eyes. But I failed. I looked, and the man looking back at me wasn't exactly me. Oh, it had my face, my jawline, my scar above the right eyebrow. But the eyes, they were too wide, too patient. They didn't blink when I did. I leaned closer. So did he. I raised my hand. So did he. But just a half second too late. And then he smiled. Not me. Him. The thing in the mirror. The echo. I stumbled back. Heart pounding. Fists clenched. Expecting the lights to flicker. The bear to twitch. The frequency to hum. But none of that happened. Just silence. And the knowledge that I didn't leave Anchor Point alone. I carried something out. And maybe it carried me. The mirror was still now. Normal. But I didn't check twice. I left. Kept driving. And as the sun finally cracked the edge of the sky, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. Because whatever was behind the glass, it wasn't trapped anymore. And it had my face. I kept the bear with me. Still do. Just in case the rules shift again. Because I've learned something no one tells you in horror stories when you walk out of hell. It doesn't slam the door behind you. It holds it open just wide enough for something else to follow. People always ask the same thing at the end of stories like this. Are you okay now? And I always give the same answer. Yeah, I'm doing better. But the truth, I'm not okay. I'm just quieter about it. Because once you've seen behind the curtain, once you've stood inside a mall that eats grief and heard the silence between realities, you don't go back. You just adjust. You learn to smile when the lights flicker. You keep track of the clock when it pauses for too long. You stop using mirrors that don't reflect sadness correctly. And most of all, you remember the rules. Because the rules remember you. I've come to realize that Anchor Point wasn't cursed in the way people think. It wasn't built on a burial ground or summoned by a ritual. It was a response. A shape formed by all the things people refuse to bury. Trauma, regret, love that had nowhere to go. The fire didn't open the mall's wounds. The people did. And we kept cutting it. Over and over. With every forgotten story and every empty promise. Until it bled ghosts. So no, I'm not haunted by one building. I'm haunted by what it revealed. That this world is thin in places. Worn down. Cracked open like old paint. And through those cracks, things listen. They wait. Not to punish you, but to mirror you. To show you what you've refused to face. And if you're like me, broken in just the right way, they'll offer you a choice. Stay. Or wake up. I made mine. I walked out. But sometimes, in the corner of my motel room, I still see flickering blue. A flicker that hums. A flicker that feels like her. Marin. June. Even Ramirez. Not calling for me. Just remembering with me. And that's enough. Because this isn't a ghost story. This is a story about grief that built its own address. And some doors don't close. They just wait. Until you do. So if you hear the music, if the mall whispers your name through a power outage or a broken speaker, don't follow it, don't answer. Because if you do, you might find out you've already been there. And worse, you never left. People always ask the same thing at the end of stories like this. Are you okay now? And I always give the same answer. Yeah, I'm doing better. But the truth, I'm not okay. I'm just quieter about it. Because once you've seen behind the curtain, once you've stood inside a mall that eats grief and heard the silence between realities, you don't go back, you just adjust. You learn to smile when the lights flicker. You keep track of the clock when it pauses for too long. You stop using mirrors that don't reflect sadness correctly. And most of all, you remember the rules. Because the rules remember you. I've come to realize that Anchor Point wasn't cursed in the way people think. It wasn't built on a burial ground or summoned by a ritual. It was a response. A shape formed by all the things people refuse to bury. Trauma. Regret. Love that had nowhere to go. The fire didn't open the mall's wounds. The people did. And we kept cutting it. Over and over. With every forgotten story. And every empty promise. Until it bled ghosts. So no, I'm not haunted by one building. I'm haunted by what it revealed. That this world is thin in places. Worn down. Cracked open like old paint. And through those cracks, things listen. They wait. Not to punish you, but to mirror you. To show you what you've refused to face. And if you're like me, broken in just the right way, they'll offer you a choice. Stay. Or wake up. I made mine. I walked out. But sometimes, in the corner of my motel room, I still see flickering blue. A flicker that hums. A flicker that feels like her. Marin. June. Even Ramirez. Not calling for me. Just remembering with me. And that's enough. Because this isn't a ghost story. This is a story about grief that built its own address. And some doors don't close. They just wait until you do. So if you hear the music, if the mall whispers your name through a power outage or a broken speaker, don't follow it. Don't answer. Because if you do, You might find out you've already been there. And worse, you never left. I moved states, changed my name, burned every document that tied me to Anchor Point Plaza. I even switched to a flip phone. No apps, no signal tracing, no more 3:38 a.m. notifications. But even now, especially now, I know something stayed with me. Not just the bear. Not just the memories. Something deeper, quieter. Like a hum beneath the skin. Like a second heartbeat that doesn't pump blood. It pumps reminders. I found a job hauling freight up the coast. Easy hours. Empty roads. It's the kind of life made for forgetting. But Anchor Point doesn't let you forget. Not really. Not ever. One night, just outside of Crescent City, I pulled over to sleep in the truck cab. The air was still, moonless. I opened the glove box to grab a flashlight, and sitting there, on top of the map I hadn't used in weeks, was a red plastic mall token. Faded. Melted at the edge. With the words, Level 12. Food Court Fun Zone. I hadn't seen that coin in months. I threw it away. Burned it. Even. But there it was. Sitting like it had never left. Like it knew I'd need a reminder. A reminder that no matter how far you drive, some exits don't lead out. They just loop. The coin was warm. Like skin. I didn't touch it again. Just closed the glove box and drove until the sky broke with morning. But the whole ride, the speakers buzzed not with music, but with that same mall jingle, reversed and slowed, laced with whispers I no longer tried to understand. Because here's the thing they never teach you in therapy. If something breaks you in just the right shape, the world reshapes itself around that fracture. You stop being just a man. You become a carrier. A vector. I might have left Anchor Point, but it left something inside me. And now I think it's growing. It was just past 2 unreserved a.m. when I heard the knock. Not loud. Not rushed. 2 knocks. Then silence. Like someone who already knew I was awake. The kind of knock that makes your stomach twist before your feet move. I sat there, frozen on the motel bed, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the microwave clock. The second knock came exactly 30 seconds later. No more, no less. I opened the door. He was standing in shadow, wearing an old security jacket. The Anchor Point patch was faded but intact. His face familiar. Too familiar. But wrong, like a dream version of someone I couldn't place. Eyes too dark. Smile too wide. No bags. No car outside. Just him. Standing there like he'd walked straight out of the frequency. He held something in his hand, wrapped in brown paper. "You dropped this," he said. His voice was calm. Polite. But underneath it vibrated like old speaker static and floorboard groans. He extended the package. I didn't take it. "What is it?" I asked. He smiled again. And this time I saw it. His teeth were perfectly square, uniform, like keys on a piano. "You'll know when it's time," he said. And then he turned. Walked away. I stepped outside, barefoot on cracked asphalt, trying to follow. But he was gone. Vanished between 2 parked cars that hadn't moved in weeks. I looked down at the package. Still at my feet. Still humming. Not audibly. But in that Anchor Point way felt more than heard. I didn't open it. Not that night. But I knew what was inside. I remembered it. A VHS tape. Labeled Security Feed 11/24/18. Back hallway, sublevel. The date of the fire. The feed that had never been found. I left it on the desk. But the next morning it was gone. Only a spiral drawn in ash where it had been. Someone is tracking me. Or warning me. Or both. And if the feed exists again, if that door is opening back up, I know what comes next. Anchor Point wasn't done with me. Not yet. It started with the cashier at the truck stop. I handed him a 20, and he smiled too long. Not in a rude way. In a recognition way. Like we were part of the same inside joke, but I didn't know the punchline. I glanced at his name tag. No name. Just static lines scratched into plastic. I laughed it off, told myself I was tired. But then it happened again. At a laundromat in Montana. A woman folded towels with robotic precision, 1, 2, 3, stack over and over. She looked up, and her eyes didn't blink, just stared. Through me, like she was scanning my shape to see if I still fit the frequency. I left instantly, but it didn't stop there. Everywhere I went, I saw them. People who weren't quite people. Faces like masks drawn from memory. Movements just slightly out of sync with time. And always the same look when they caught me watching soft recognition. Like Ramirez. Like the girl in the cart. Like the drifters. I started calling them echoes. That's what they feel like, residual ghosts folded into strangers. But here's the thing that eats me alive: they don't haunt me. They follow me. They recognize me. And worst of all, I think some of them are starting to remember me by name. One in particular, a man in a gray hoodie outside a rest stop, just whispered, still carrying the bear before vanishing into the crowd. I didn't show it to anyone. I hadn't spoken it aloud in weeks. But they knew. So now I live by instinct. I scan reflections. I avoid fluorescent lighting. I don't speak to strangers who smile too quickly. Because I don't know which ones are real anymore. Or maybe they all are and I'm the fake one now. Maybe leaving Anchor Point rewired me so badly that reality only pretends to make sense anymore. I keep the bear in my glove box. I haven't touched it. But sometimes, at night, it shifts, slightly. Like it's turning to listen. And every time it does, I see another pair of those eyes staring from a crowd. And I know the drifters are multiplying. It started subtly. At first, it felt like forgetting to lock a door. That brief flicker of uncertainty. Did I actually do it? Or did I just think I did? But now it's worse. Now it's like someone else is editing my memories while I sleep. I remember the mall burning. I remember the spiral. I remember Marin's voice. And June's little laugh echoing across the marble. But now when I try to replay it, the sounds are off. The mall music is different, slower, minor key. And June's laugh. It overlaps itself, like a tape loop stuck in rewind. I keep a notebook now. Try to track the differences. One day, the food court had 6 tables. The next, 7. The bear was stitched with blue thread. Now it's red. Ramirez told me the rules in the security office. No, wait. He told me in the elevator. Right. Or was it the loading dock? The problem isn't just that the details change. It's that I remember both versions as true. And the more I try to pin them down, the more unstable they become. Like chasing fog with a butterfly net. I even started recording my own voice before I sleep. Little recaps. Today is Tuesday. The motel is in Idaho. The bear is in the drawer. But when I play them back, the voice is still mine, but the tone is off. Too calm. Too certain. And sometimes it says things I don't remember saying. Like, don't open the door tomorrow. He's early. The worst part, I didn't open the door, and something scratched it anyway. 3 times. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. It left no marks, only the smell of burnt plastic and a spiral etched in steam across the window. So what do I trust now? The notebook, the recordings, my own eyes. Because lately, my reflection nods when I don't. My memory of leaving the mall walking out into the sun has changed. I'm not sure I walked out anymore. I think I was pushed, or traded, or replaced. Anchor Point didn't just break me, it rewrote me. Line by line, until I became part of the rules. And the more I fight it, the more the story rewrites itself. It happened in Utah. Small town. I was renting a room above a bait shop, quiet. Forgettable. Just how I liked it. Until the scratching started. 3 nights in a row, just after 3:38 a.m. Always 3 long scratches, like something was drawing, not clawing. The landlord had a kid, maybe 7, pale, quiet, never spoke a word. But his eyes were wrong, not afraid, just knowing. One morning, I found him in the hallway outside my door, sitting cross-legged with a red marker in one hand and something black smeared across his cheek. I looked past him and felt my stomach twist. The wall was covered. A massive spiral of symbols, drawn in both marker and what smelled like dried blood. And in the center of it all was a floor plan. Anchor Point Plaza. Every store. Every hallway. Every hidden corridor the fire department never knew about. All drawn by a kid who never set foot in that mall. I asked him where he saw it. He didn't speak, just pointed at the air like the blueprint had floated down from above, like it was sent. I knelt beside him, gently. What does it mean? I asked. That's when he finally spoke. Just 3 words. It's not done. His voice wasn't a whisper. It was a statement. Solid. Meant. And then he dropped the marker and walked away. Left me kneeling in front of a wall that shouldn't exist. Because that hallway, that apartment was freshly painted the day before. I checked the records. There had been no tenant. No child. The landlord swore I was the only one renting. But the spiral's still there. The map burned into the drywall, visible only when I turned the lights off and ran the blacklight from my Zippo. Room 209 circled in red. U written inside. That wasn't where I lived. That was where I slept. The difference now mattered. Because the mall didn't need buildings anymore. It just needed space. And belief. And people who'd already seen too much. The boy wasn't real. Or maybe he was. But he drew something real. And now that the spiral's back, so is the game. I made a mistake. I went digging. Again. I told myself it was for closure. For truth. But deep down it was obsession. Like a song stuck in your head that you need to finish or you'll lose your mind. I called in a favor from an old military contact, someone with access to old security networks and deep building archives. Anchor Point Plaza, I said. Staff records, maintenance logs, anything pre-Black Friday fire. He sent me a file, encrypted, labeled simply, Cycle 38 ELI, Mercer. My heart skipped. I never told him my full name. I opened the file. It was a scanned employee intake sheet. From 1986. Anchor Point Plaza, grand opening. Job title overnight security. Name Elias Mercer. Social security number matched mine. Blood type matched mine. Birth date? Didn't. The record was filed 11 years before I was born. But the signature, I recognized it. Because I'd signed it myself before. Recently. When Walter Gray handed me the clipboard, I checked the ink pattern. The smudge on the second E. Identical. I didn't just work there. I was meant to. Written into its structure like a load-bearing beam. The mall didn't pick me out of desperation. It built itself with me inside. Like it knew I'd come. Or worse, like I already had. Anchor Point wasn't just haunted. It was intelligent, self-sustaining, feeding itself looped stories and recycled souls. And now I was part of the mythos. Not as a victim. Not even as a witness. As infrastructure. That's why I keep dreaming of hallways that don't end. Shifts that never finish. Radios that never fully lose signal. Because I haven't left. Not really. I think I've been on duty this whole time. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere beneath the exit. Every time I breathe outside, I wonder, am I in the real world? Or just the break room between hauntings? Because now I understand I was always on the list. I wasn't hired. I was remembered. If you're hearing this, it means the frequency found you. It means the mall isn't done yet. Maybe you found something weird in the mail. Maybe you dreamed of mannequins in a burning food court. Or maybe you just heard that music. That warped, melting jingle echoing from a dead speaker. Whatever brought you here, it wasn't random. You were chosen. Or maybe remembered. I've said everything I could. I've left maps in strange places, burned tokens, scratched spirals into glass. But none of it matters if you don't follow one simple truth. The rules aren't there to protect you from the mall. They're there to protect the mall from you. Break them and it notices. Try to leave and it follows. Try to forget and it rewrites. I did all three. Now I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I'm speaking to you from a motel room or from the sub-level beneath Anchor Point. The walls feel the same now. The air hums the same. And the bear in the glove box still turns to listen. I don't think this story has an ending. Only a rotation. A turning of the wheel. You'll feel it soon, the spiral beneath your feet. The lights that flicker when you lie. The faces in crowds that don't quite belong. When it starts, don't panic. Don't ask questions. And above all, don't go back to the mall. Because once you've seen it, it sees you back. I tried to warn you in the ways I knew how. If this is playing in your dreams, or on a radio without power, or in the static between thoughts, then you already crossed over. I'm sorry. You might still escape. Or you might become part of the next shift. There's always a next shift. The plaza always needs someone to watch the doors. If you hear the knock, don't open it. If you see the map, don't follow it. And if someone offers you a bear, don't take it. And if you've already taken it, then, welcome. You're on duty now. If you made it this far, maybe part of you already knew the truth. That malls don't just rot with time. Some of them remember you. And if you've ever felt like your life's been looping, like something unseen is watching from the corners of routine, you're not broken. You're tuned in. That's the real horror, isn't it? Not ghosts, not monsters, but the idea that we're being written into stories we didn't agree to and can't seem to walk out of. But you're not alone. Not here. I built this channel to trap those stories, not the people who carry them. So if this one struck a nerve, if it echoed something you can't explain, drop a comment. I want to hear what your spiral looks like, what rules you've lived by. Save this video. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not crazy. And if you're new, hit subscribe because the next story might just be your shift. Until then, don't take the bear.